We will get straight into the CNMI legislators. I believe this is a investigation into the governor.
The governor purchased a car battery in the amount of $120 some. That would have been January 28, 2019. First thing in the morning, it was about 8:30 in the morning. That same day, he transferred that vehicle for which the battery was purchased to Mr. Mirabales. And you can see that in the certificate of ownership in BMV's submission. It's on the very first page, the date that the transfer was effected. Very first page. I don't know how it says on it. I don't have the date set. Okay. And then further, what's even more perplexing is that later in the records, in March 2019, March 26, 2019, there is a vehicle bill of sale from Mr. Brian Romalor to Mr. Mirabales that appears to have been written out by Ms. Juana Leon Guerrero herself and signed by these two gentlemen. So this would be the vehicle bill of sale. I apologize, I do not have the big set. Okay. Sure. It is big stack. I'm referring to the non-big stack version. But okay. So the vehicle, the certificate of ownership is 0006. The bill of sale, oh, I'm sorry, 0001. The bill of sale is 0004. And it does appear from the vehicle bill of sale that the director herself filled the vehicle bill of sale out and had these two gentlemen sign. And we would strongly urge Mr. Chairman and colleagues that we call in Director Leon Guerrero to explain what happened with this vehicle. There are really no records that show why Mr. Romalor's name appears in the file. And I would note that the most important thing is the first fact that I started out with, which is that the governor transferred this vehicle to another individual, a private individual, on the same day that he bought the battery and subsequently billed it to taxpayers. And I do want to just note for the members' awareness that Mr. Romalor actually reached out to me privately last week when I guess he had heard somehow that his name was coming up, was appearing in our records, and he seemed extremely concerned and even fearful in some ways and uneasy to the point of, I would say even paranoia. He just very worried, and he wanted to know what was our interest in this vehicle, but he wouldn't answer any questions either. And so I would suggest, if there is more to this vehicle that this committee might be interested in, we may want to call in Mr. Romalor or ask him for a written statement, and the same with Mr. Mirabales. And perhaps both these gentlemen, as well as Director Leon Guerrero, could shed some light on the story behind this vehicle. But even without their testimonies, colleagues, the certificate of ownership that we have on record and the car battery purchase receipt that we have on record both point to potential criminal conversion of a public asset to a private.
Wow.
As we had discussed before. And I would like to yield now to the minority leader on the subject of DPS's non-response.
Did you hear that, Pran?
Rep. Saban, before I recognize the minority leader, Vice Chair.
Thank you, Chair. So, Ron, are you making a motion? Call in?
Yes, I would like to, we actually have a number of individuals that we would recommend to appear on our list of witnesses, or to appear as witnesses before this body. And yes, Director Leon Guerrero, Mr. Rolando, and Mr. Mirabales are the first three that we would.
Before we recognize your motion, let us, I guess we'll get to the next point of that before we can require the witnesses to be present. Right now, we're just establishing some potential wrongdoings by motor vehicle. We don't know what the involvement is. So before we get into that, we'll finish with the minority leader before we, if I recognize that motion by Rep. Sablan. Rep. Rose, please.
Thank you, Chairman. Thank you, colleagues. Good afternoon. Chairman and colleagues, referring to old business, item 2, letter B, the letter to Department of Public Safety's Commissioner Robert Guerrero. I'm deeply saddened to see that this letter was sent out on July 28, 2020, and in this 1301 letter requesting for documents to Commissioner Guerrero, we asked for several records to be submitted to our committee.
Good morning, colleagues. The Committee of the Whole is called to order.
Within 5
We have
days
invited
of the receipt of this
panel
letter,
guests.
or
We have the Office
4,
of Finance and Budget,
2020.
Steve Guerrero,
At the latest, pursuant to
Joel
the legal
Angelai, and
authorities
Mr.
set
Joe
forth
Cabana,
in 1 CMC
and
section
also
1301
Vanessa
to 1309.
Valencia behind me.
Today is August 10. We have not heard any response from the DPS Commissioner, none whatsoever. And I find this deeply concerning when pretty much all the other agencies and departments at least responded. Some requesting for extended time to gather the documents. But we got nothing from them. And just for a quick review, we asked for several types of documents under Appendix A, the very last page, which is any and all records of meetings that with the deer meat for dinner, Mr. Robert Arrington and Governor Ralph Torres' trip to the Northern Islands, including meeting agendas, meeting minutes, meeting notes, and our video or audio recordings. And there were several other things that we asked for that included any and all boats, vehicles, equipment, gear, materials, or supplies that the Department of Public utilized for this promotional trip, and several other things, log sheets, manifests, and names and any personnel in the Department of Public Safety. It's a long list because of our time here today. I won't read through everything, but you all have a copy, and you know that there were at least 8 items, none to which the Commissioner even responded to. So, Chairman and colleagues, I would like to request that at this point, since this letter was completely ignored, that we move to subpoena these documents. So moved.
Okay. Thank you, Rep. Probst. There is a motion. Before I recognize this motion, Representative Sablan, floor, has a question.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and my apologies for being slightly late on today's proceedings. But if I may ask on open discussion on the motion offered by our minority leader, that the letter that you have sent to or solicit to the Commissioner of Department of Public Safety, did they receive those documents, Mr. Chair?
Yes. July 20.
July 28th. And prior to this meeting today, did your office make any follow-ups as to why we didn't get any response, maybe even a response by letter?
We have not reached out. I believe everyone that we sent letters out either contact our office for extension or did submit the documents. So their DPS is the only one that has not replied or sent any message to my office.
So no response and not even a request for an extension was reached out to your office?
That's correct.
Thank you for that clarification. I believe, I'm not too sure if that we should support a subpoena of, I would like that if we can reach out at least one more time with the Commissioner. And if that's not too much to ask, thank you.
Thank you, Floor Leader.
Order, Mr. Chairman.
State your order.
We actually already approved the issuance of the subpoena at our last committee meeting. And what we agreed as a body was that the subpoena would go out immediately upon the failure of the agency to comply with your 1301 letter. And so I would urge that we go ahead and have you issue that subpoena for those records, because the DPS Commissioner has failed to comply and has failed to even ask for an extension. We gave him that opportunity, and now we need those records, and we've already approved it. So what I would suggest is that go out today, we give them by close of business tomorrow, send them the records that they should have been preparing these past 10 days. And further, Mr. Chairman, we would urge that we call in the Commissioner himself as a witness, add him to our witness list, and mandate that none of our witnesses should be allowed to bring in any sidearms to this body for their consequences. Thank you.
Thank you, Representative Salon. Noted. Any other comments, questions, concerns before we take that vote? Ready? Clerk, go to roll. Which motion? The motion is to issue the subpoena to DPS.
Vice Chairman Lorenzo I. De Leon Guerrero. Representative Luis John Castro.
Yes.
Representative Donald Manglonia.
Yes.
Representative Edwin Probst.
Yes.
Representative Cristina Sablan.
Yes.
Representative J.P. Sablan, John Paul.
Yeah.
Representative Edmund Villagomez.
Yes.
Mr. Chairman.
Yes.
Mr. Chairman, all 8 members present voted yes.
Okay, motion stands. I would require the clerk and the legal counsel to prepare the draft letter so we can be signed today. Thank you. Further. The draft subpoena, sorry.
The subpoena for the document.
Thank you.
Just clarification, the vote that we made, Mr. Chairman, is to subpoena the individual here, Commissioner, or subpoena the document.
The documents.
What
Not the Commissioner?
what we had discussed earlier, just the point of information, was that we would get to the list of witnesses to call in after we wrap up the rest of the agenda.
So clarified.
Thank you. Okay, moving along, is there any other questions, comments, concerns on old businesses before we move on to the other? There are none. Under new business, the review of documents listed below, Commonwealth Casino CCC, Mayor's Office. We did receive documents from the Secretary of Finance. We did receive DLNR. We did receive from Homeland Security, Mariana's Visitors Authority as well, and I believe most of them are for extension. Some were received. I think Finance is the one. I believe there was a concern brought up by a member, and I'll recognize that member now, Rep. Saban.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. On the subject of the Department of Finance and their submission, the record should reflect that Finance has not fully complied with the subpoena. And we note that the subpoena that you issued requires certification of complete submission, and there is no such statement. Instead, what we have, colleagues, is an affidavit from Ms. Margaret Bertha Torres, the Director of Administrative Services and Finance, that indicates that they actually redacted the original documents. And so what we asked for was the unredacted records, specifically those records showing the credit card numbers that for the cards that had been used throughout the governor's expenditures going all the way back to 2014. And according to the timeline that Ms. Torres provided in her affidavit, after the initial release of records to a citizen who filed an Open Government Act request, those initial records were not redacted and did show the last 4 digits of credit card numbers. Finance actually went back and altered the originals when we, the members of the House of Representatives, requested those same documents. I am honestly shocked, Mr. Chairman and colleagues. I have never heard of such a thing. I am just flabbergasted that original records were redacted only after we made our request, only after Finance became aware that we were doing any kind of inquiry. And I do think that we should call in, add to our list of witnesses, the Secretary himself as well as Director Torres. Fortunately, we do have at least some unredacted records showing the last 4 numbers of at least 17 different credit cards. These have already been published online by Kandit and others and widely circulated in social media. They've also been entered into our record as House communications. We've gone through the records that have been circulated and submitted for the House record, and I'd like to ask our Sergeant Arms to just circulate a sampling of these 17 credit cards so you know what it looks like. And when we go back to the records that we have, that Finance redacted, we know what's missing. I could recite the numbers if the members like, or give it to our LB staff to include in the committee report. But colleagues, I think that the most important point is that we should know whose names are on these cards, who paid for all these different items, and if it's not the governor's name on these cards, why is he getting reimbursed for all of the expenses? At this point, we do believe that Finance has violated the subpoena and could be held in contempt. And so, again, Mr. Chairman and colleagues, we urge that we call in the Secretary, call in the staff, and I would further move to issue a subpoena to finance as well as the governor to disclose the names on each of these cards. And we have a list of 17 credit card numbers, well, the last 4 digits of these credit card numbers. And so we should get the names of the names on those credit cards from finance and the governor's office. I'd also note, just on finance's submission, that the records for executive security are not complete. We are aware of other officers who served as the governor's personal security detail. We still do not have those notebooks. We still do not have those payroll records. And further, I think it would be really helpful for us to have the master reports that finance has generated for other categories of expenses, have the master reports from the general ledger for travel and for utilities paid out to the governor. I'd like to yield for now on the subject of finance's submission. If members have any questions or other comments.
Thank you, Rep. Sablan. Any questions, for leader?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. And just to our colleague here, Rep. Tina, can you guide us, the members on that pointer that you were mentioning that was redacted, but wasn't redacted when you guys got copies earlier?
Sure. But actually, the records that we received, that the minority received pursuant to our Open Government Act request, those were redacted. We specifically asked finance not to redact the last 4 digits of credit card numbers appearing in the document.
Right.
But what finance did was they actually redacted the originals. They went to the original documents and blacked them out with Sharpies or whiteout or whatever. And so what they gave us, I mean, they redacted the original, so that's what they have now in their custody.
But you further mentioned that there was an unredacted document that went out in Kandit News.
Right.
Is that the same document you're talking about?
Right.
That was redacted?
Yes. Thank you for asking that clarifying question, Mr. Floor Leader. So prior to the Minorities Open Government Act request, there was another request from a concerned citizen under the Open Government Act for a lot of the same records. Our request is actually broader, but the records that were circulated widely on social media and in online news did show the last 4 digits of credit card numbers. And so what we printed out, we've gone back to those records. We submitted quite a few of them already in our House communications. And so we've gone back, we've printed out, we've logged down the credit card numbers that we have been able to identify. They're not in what we got from finance. They're not in what finance has submitted to this body. And then now we know that finance is not even able to provide unredacted records because they actually doctored the original document.
Thank you for that clarification. That really makes everything clear. Mr. Chairman, I was just going over the submission of documents from finance, and it is true that some of these documents were redacted. And I posed that question with our legal counsel in our prior meeting, that in the event that documents are redacted, what course of action do we take? And it is as I recall, the response of the legal counsel is that they can redact documents, but they have to justify it. So, Mr. Chairman, the question is to you, did you receive any justification of the redacted documents? Any justification from finance? Why did they redact the documents?
No, they have not.
Okay, thank you. I yield for now.
Thank you, Mr. Floor. Vice Chair.
And this is a response or in line with the board leader's question. Go through the statement by Margaret Torres. Finance and Trade Services on item 5, saying that legal counsel had advised finance with the that the information confidentiality in terms of person, social security, must be redacted because it is confidential and protected by law. This is a strong statement from a person that holds a high degree of position in finance. She made it clear this is the statement that they were advised by their legal counsel, the administration's legal counsel, that all information, confidentiality information must be redacted. So I offer this regular members' attention. Consider your question in line with redaction of information.
Thank you, Vice Chair. Rep. Donald.
Thank you, Chairman. And just to add on to that, although the Vice Speaker mentioned that this was a statement made by Ms. Torres, I mean, statement 5, wouldn't that be hearsay? And if so, are we able to include the legal counsel in the list of witnesses to question regarding his statement that he informed Ms. Torres to redact those information? Thank you.
Thank you, Rep. Malonia. Is that a question to
The legal counsel.
Can you just restate the gist of your question?
If it is hearsay, can we add the governor's legal counsel to the list of witnesses?
Yeah, you can subpoena whoever you deem fit for being subpoenaed. If the committee believes that his testimony is relevant to the investigation, you can subpoena whoever you want, including the legal counsel. Particularly because he's giving advice to Ms. Margaret Bertha C. Torres, not to the governor. That's a different story if you're asking him about the legal advice he would be giving the governor.
Thank you. Well, I just wanted to point that out because the Vice Speaker mentioned that this is a sworn statement from Ms. Torres, but then she claimed that she received a call from the governor's legal counsel.
There's different levels of hearsay. We're not getting into the legal technical details. What you're seeking is first-hand information, and that's always best.
Thank you. I hear you. Thank you, Rep. Malonia. Recognize Representative Saban.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. On the subject of the Open Government Act, it is true that agencies may redact personal or confidential information pursuant to the Open Government Act. They have to cite the specific exemption that allows them to do that and to justify the redaction of any public record. However, there is nothing in this statement from Ms. Torres that indicates that Mr. Burnbrick advised finance to actually alter the original record. It's just for any records that they make copies of and release to the public, those records can be redacted to withhold confidential or personal information, provided that the specific exemption in the Open Government Act is cited. That said, when a legislative committee is doing an investigation, we can subpoena personal and confidential records. And we could keep those also personal and keep those also confidential and review them in executive session. That's the role and that is the authority of the investigative committee. And so what troubles me is the fact that finance redacted the original, so now this committee is not able to even get these original records so that we can properly do an investigation. Thank God for this Open Government Act request, where the earlier request, which resulted in at least some of these records being made publicly available, so that we can count the number of the credit cards, we can identify at least the last 4 digits. Those, by the way, are not generally considered confidential. And now we can go back to finance, go back to the governor and ask what names appear on these credit cards that were used for reimbursement throughout these years of expenditures. And I yield.
Thank you, Representative Saban. Any further? Okay. The chair would, I guess, request the body to, I guess before we move forward with any of this, let me go to recess first.
Yeah. For the documents from the minority block, with the unredacted, with the credit cards, you guys are submitting this for record for the body?
Yes, and we'd like to request that our clerk date stamp these documents for the.
Thank you, so clarifying.
Thank you for the short recess.
I just started biting into my sandwich. There's historic stuff going on. Representative Tina Savam just made a motion to subpoena the governor to appear before the committee and answer for these credit cards that were used in these purchases, and they're on the receipts. Basically, she wants to ask him, are these your credit cards? And if they're not his credit cards, then there's a problem. Why did the Commonwealth reimburse someone else?
Mm-hmm.
Why did you say that this was your purchase? It was a big deal.
But the other thing is, why would the finance people redact original documents?
To hide those credit card numbers. So the original release of those documents, the
hidden.
last 4 digits were not hidden.
I know, we have those.
4 digits or 6 digits? I can't
4.
remember. In the copies that finance gave to the legislature, they doctored those receipts to hide the 4 numbers. Huh? The governor and his people, yeah. Someone asked whether we might be interfering with the time the Guam legislature is supposed to go back into session. First of all, we don't care about the Guam legislature as much as we care about the Commonwealth legislature. Because the Commonwealth legislature pretty efficient at their work. And like Pam Duvall said, the Guam legislature is like watching a garden die. Secondly, they're probably not even in session yet, right? Because they said they're going to go back into session at 2 p.m., which really means 2:30 or 3. Let me check YouTube.
Wow.
Guam
It's unbelievable.
legislature. Yeah, they're not even live yet. The Guam legislature. Oh yeah, no problem. Wendy's 4 for 4.
Thanks, Chelo.
Mm-hmm. It was, do you guys realize how unbelievably cheap this is compared to like going anywhere else?
Compared to going to the store and buying ingredients
Yeah.
to cook your own meal.
But I have to tell you, I've learned something from cooking steaks recently. Don't ever buy New York steak, even though it's more expensive than chuck steak, because chuck steak is almost as good as ribeye steak, which means it's of course better than New York steak. It's just so much cheaper than New York steak.
What is it, chuck steak?
Chuck steak, yeah.
You just have to know how to cook it though.
I don't know. I just
If you overcook it, you're done.
Oh yeah. I just
I love the way you make your steaks.
Salt and pepper and garlic powder
And oil.
and olive oil. Yeah. Marinate it for 20 minutes in the fridge, and then fry it on hot butter. It's really good.
It's ready too.
Is the Commonwealth legislature back?
Nope, it's been muted.
They're just getting the subpoena ready for the governor, right?
Oh, is that what they're doing? Oh, no, I don't think they voted on it yet. John Fiala says they are redacted because they are crooks, plain and simple.
Ed and Tina sit right next to each
Oh, okay, cool. Tim Fawcett says Representative Sablon came prepared. Unlike Senator Joseph Augustine, Ignacio de la Cruz says thank you to the special committee for the great work. Pam Duvall says our legislature is still not in session. Of course, they're only 13 minutes late right now, so they're not going to be in session yet. Ignacio de la Cruz says, I am happy that more of the dirt is coming out. You know, it is a bittersweet thing, the exposing of corruption. The bitter part is that the corruption exists. And a lot of times it's a hard pill to swallow. You know, like we live in these small islands. Everyone's supposed to be family oriented and doing the right thing and all that.
Supposed to help
we
each
think
other.
The best of our leaders.
Yes.
We want to give them the benefit of the doubt. But believe me, most of them are not worthy of the benefit of the doubt because most of them are crooks. And the sweet part, of course, is that, you know, someone did their job, whether it is in the legislature, using their oversight authority, or in the media with investigations, or the attorney general, or the police, or whoever is doing their jobs to expose what is not right. And that's why I say bittersweet. Tim Fawcett says, advised by legal counsel, aka the Torres brothers. It was Nate Horn who was like, who's keeping an eye on the punctual Guam legislature? It's 2 p.m. The Guam legislature ain't even keeping an eye on the Guam legislature. Peter John Chrysostomo Messnan says it's common practice for records to magically disappear within this government. Tim Fawcett says redacting originals, evidence tampering? Yeah. Jill Pareto says to Tim, as one of our senators would put it, genuine mistake. Jackie Castro says, I like the way that the CNMI conducts their hearings better than the Guam legislature, who takes a lot of breaks. Yep. Melvin Santos says, medium rare with lemon and soy sauce finadeni. Ignacio de la Cruz says, ever since the corruption has always existed, but leaders of the past and the present had each other's backs. Thankfully, now there is more accountability. Eileen Celoso says, absolutely agree with Jackie.
There.
Oh, no, that was just me
That's
turning
you?
the thing back on. Nothing yet, huh? What are they waiting for? Legal counsel to do something? Or maybe to prepare the motion or something. Look at them. They're not talking to each other. They're not hiding anything. They're not having private conversations like the Guam legislature has. You know?
I think Tina's talking.
Oh.
Yeah, see?
Let me refresh on the legislature thing, the Guam legislature. Guam legislature is still not in session. So I missed some of it because I was in line at Wendy's, but I was watching the Kandit stream when I saw there was a break because of the internet thing. But I even heard you say, "Did you hear that, Prim?" And it was about the car. Well, what did she say about Brian?
The governor transferred a government vehicle to that man.
But what did
Ownership.
What did Brian Romulor
He
say
called
to
her
Tina?
questioning why is his name coming up.
But why is he saying that
He
it's not
didn't
true?
answer any of her questions. He just wants to know why is his name coming up.
Oh, so
He just told on himself.
oh, okay. So, there
So
was
she's like, you know what? We need to look into this. Thanks for calling, buddy.
so he called just to ask why is my name coming
Yeah.
up? Oh, because Governor Torres put it in a thing.
Ownership.
That's
An
why.
ownership.
Hey, I've come across a couple of Guam businessmen who have told me that they were about to do business, and this is separately. They were offered to do business with Governor Torres, the Torres brothers, but they decided not to because they didn't want, even if it was going to be good business, they didn't know where the money was coming from. they didn't want to get mixed up in any federal anything, you know? I was like, you made the right choice, buddy.
Yep.
You mean like, will Governor Torres just defy the subpoena?
Probably.
Probably.
He can't face it. Can't face it. He wants you guys, wants us to believe.
Yeah, for the people that are gonna continue to lie.
Patricia Guerrero says, could there be violations of both the CNMI Auditing Act as well as the Open Government Act statutes by the Department of Finance in redacting or altering the day original documents of public records, more specifically public funds, expenditures, and liquidations on record? Could there be evidence tampering of potential financial crimes? Juan Barcinas says, accelerate special committee. Why CNMI recession and federal assistance program are too slow? Yeah, that's a big deal happening over there. Their PUA and FPUC isn't being processed by their Department of Labor at any quick pace.
But they're accepting applications for the CW1s and inputting it in the system.
Oh, yeah?
I read Congressman Probst, Tina Sablan, and one more, Sheila Babalta. They all went to the PUA this morning to question them. He has a whole post on it.
How did it turn out?
They're supposed to be working on it. They explained they only have 10 employees, 3 covering the emails, and there's 10 phone lines. So, yeah. It's weird, and then Guam also receiving an additional $185 million. It makes you wonder what's the holdback on that $60 million payout. That's supposed. Are they waiting because they used that money for something else? Like
on Guam or something?
Yeah, on Guam. You know, they're saying, they can't pay it because of all the fraud claims. That I really think that's bull.
There's something going on with Gov Guam finances.
Something.
Because there's just no way that the Gov Guam could have been floated this entire time, except for that federal money. If I were the Guam legislature and I wanted to avoid candid news, I would have gone into session on time today. Yeah, 20 minutes ago. Because our focus is on the CNMI legislature. Oh my God, the sandwich is so good.
It is. The bread's so soft.
Thank you, members.
There we go, baby.
For the long break. We're back. We're under new item under Secretary of Finance.
Guam would never apologize.
Chair recognizes Representative Sablan.
For taking long break.
Yes, at this time, Mr. Chairman, I would move to add to our list of witnesses to summon, ideally this week, the Secretary of Finance, the Director of Administrative Services for Finance, as well as any other individuals who signed off and certified the governor's reimbursement, to explain why and how original records that we have requested from the House were redacted, so that this investigative committee was not able to get the records that we needed to continue with our investigation. And so I so move, Mr. Chairman.
You may proceed.
And having said that, though, I would also like to just state for the record that, as we discussed during the recess, we should assume that the governor's name appears on all of these credit cards. Our first interest is in getting some kind of explanation from finance as to why they redacted the original. But to get to the question of whose names are all on these credit cards and to verify that these are all of the governor's credit cards, we really can only get that from the governor himself. So we can save that subpoena or that summons for later down the road. For now, the motion is to call in these witnesses from finance, as well as the legal counsel that advised the director to redact the documents prior to the
Thank you, Representative Sablan. Any further on that? I guess, clerk, call the roll. And the motion is to summon Secretary of Finance, Ms. Bertha Torres, Mr. Burnbridge, and the Jane and John Doe. Is that what you, the individuals certifying those documents present for this committee. Okay, well, just the three then, or the four. Okay, so are we clear with that? The four members, Secretary of Finance, Ms. Torres, and Mr. Burbidge. Okay.
Vice Chairman Lorenzo I. De Leon Guerrero. Representative Louis John Castro.
Good.
Representative Donald Manglonia.
Yes.
Representative Edwin Probst.
Yes.
Representative Christina Sablan.
Yes.
Representative John Paul Sablan.
Yeah.
Representative Edmund Villagomez.
Yes.
Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman, all 8 members present voted yes.
Thank you, clerk. So motion is adopted. Council, please prepare the summons, and we'll schedule that meeting this week. Any further on under new business?
Mr. Chairman,
Yes.
my apologies, because I'm looking at the listing of the legal counsel and the individuals to be subpoenaed. So the MBA, Juana, Mr. Romeler, did you guys took a vote on that? Do we think? No, we're not there yet. I'm sorry, because I'm just looking at the list of witnesses that the legal counsel is writing down there on his computer. Thank you, so perfect.
Thank you, Lord.
Okay, so, sign on the date. Those come in.
Before we decide on the date,
Convene is ready to prepare, and based on our schedule, we do have one.
before we decide on the date, I believe we have a session this Thursday, so Friday. Friday.
Yeah.
Friday morning.
Well,
10 a.m.
Ralph Torres gets to call
in the
himself a
afternoon,
break.
okay?
Because they changed the motion. They left him out. They're going to go with the Secretary of Finance, the Administrator of something. Her name is Bertha Torres. What's his name? Burnbridge, who is the legal counsel for the governor, and someone else. They're going to subpoena 4 people, but not Governor Ralph Torres.
Is that a motion?
Yes, I move to summon these 3 individuals to this chamber on Thursday, August 6th, in the morning.
Is there any second? Second, okay, so, under discussion.
And I point out to the members that the customary time is 5 days. I would like an explicit decision that you're going to meet rather than the customary 5 days. Just so it's clear on the record that I didn't advise you that the customary time is 5 days. I want to make sure that we're voting on the 3 days specifically. Thank you.
Yeah, and, I mean, I think that the question that we really want them to explain on the record is why? Why they redacted these records after we requested them.
Counsel, Mr. Chair,
Yes.
I know that the normal process is 5 days, but nothing stops this body to invite any witnesses within that correct?
That's correct.
Legal counsel?
As long as we vote on it.
Do you need us to vote to call them in within 3 days?
Just the case for the record. Because the language says the subpoena shall be issued with 5 days' notice unless the committee says otherwise. I don't want you to say otherwise by saying it's 3 days, we're aware of the 5-day customary period. We are aware that 3 days is what we're asking for. That's all, just a simple clarification.
Well, we could justify that we just wanted to know why.
That's fine.
It's not like we're gonna have a bunch of really, questions.
Yeah, it's gonna be a short.
It's gonna be a short, we just wanted to, state.
And I think all of you can just say so advised that the legal period is any time the committee wants.
Just a voice vote.
Yeah, it doesn't matter.
Okay, so please restate your motion.
I move to call in the Secretary of Finance, Ms. Margaret Torres, the Director of Administrative Services, and Mr. Gil Bernberg, Governor's Legal Counsel, on Thursday morning, 10 a.m. So moved.
Any question, discussion? Ready? All those in favor say
Aye.
All those not in favor say nay. Motion carries. Okay, moving along, under miscellaneous.
Yeah.
Okay, let's go back to under new business, and I'll recognize Representative Probst.
Thank you, Chairman. I submitted for copies today to turn in additional OGA documents. Did everybody get a copy with regard to reimbursements? It should have been date stamped A00031. Did members? Want to make sure. It's for reimbursements for $2,332.63. There were 15 copies there.
Let's recess real quick. See if everyone has copies. Oh, okay. Sarge has it.
Okay.
Sarge,
Yeah.
please, can I get one? You may continue, Rep. Pro.
There's one high.
Okay, Rep. Brooks, you may proceed. What?
Actually, and before we, Council, sorry, I'm having you guys do two different things at the same time. I apologize. I'll give you dual compensation. That wasn't funny. So, Council, I wanted to, yeah, I know, but before we get to that, I wanted to ask if you could pull up Title 70 under Department of Finance, just to remind Chairman, colleagues, and the viewers about new rules, official representation expenses under Title 70, under Department of Finance, Part 100. You want to take a short recess. It looks like we have technical difficulties here. Short recess,
Do you
Chair.
have a copy? You can read out the copy if you want.
Okay.
What will be?
Okay, but colleagues, can we just go ahead and start going over this? Huh?
may
Okay,
proceed, Mr.
thank you, Chairman and colleagues. Okay, first thing I wanted to call in, as a reminder, as we discussed in our previous special committee meeting, about Title 70, Department of Finance, Part 100 under official representation expenses requires certain documentation, and for official representation expenses. And the main things, at a bare minimum, this is Part 100, if you scroll down to Part 100, must include, at a bare minimum, the name and position of persons entertained, that's one. Number two, nature and purpose of the expense and its direct relationship to CNMI government business. And number three, description of matters discussed. Number four, original receipts and supporting documents. Chairman and colleagues, if we could just go through this, which I'm submitting for the record, which is made stamped beginning at A00031. This is another long line of reimbursements submitted by the governor. And some of them are concerning. I will explain it, but let's just go through these, if we may. The first page, of course, is submitted for reimbursement on April 9. The Secretary of Finance, title subject reimbursement for several different items listed here from February 7 through March 28 of 2019 for various reimbursements under official representation expenses. Justification on that, the total is $2,332.63, and then it has justification. If you turn the pages to A00033, one of the first very concerning documents that we saw was a meeting with Black micro reps. Once again, this fails to meet the bare minimum requirements for official representation expenses, violating Title 70. But what I do want you to take notice is that this is a meeting with Black micro representatives. No indication what the meeting is for, but we do know that they are contractors, Black micro. So it is very strange and peculiar that the governor would be hosting Black micro representatives, and it's for an amount for 4 guests, as that includes the governor, for A0033. For a meal at Fiesta at Teppanyaki, items that include tenderloin seafood, sauteed foie gras, Wagyu beef, Wagyu sirloin, Sauvignon Blanc, and several other things. The total for this bill was $282 in cash. Again, concern here, this is a meeting with Black micro reps. What benefit did the public gain from this? Again, no documentation of the bare minimum threshold. And then if you turn the pages, you'll see other similar concerns that there's no documentation. On A00034, on the very next page, if you flip it over, there is a hosting of a CNMI rugby team with only 4 people. I believe there's more than 4 people on a rugby team. That's pretty minor. But again, no description for what it is. And then on that same page, there is a reimbursement for Marriott Marquis, Washington, D.C., and it's for a total of $209.92. But there's no indication as to not even who he met with. There's no name on this. No name, no record, no nothing. This is for $209.92, no information whatsoever. The only thing that we do know is that it was on February 19, 2020, with 6 guests. No indication, yet it was still reimbursed. And then you turn the page to A00035, meeting with Ed Moon. Ed Moon. I would like to ask my colleague, Representative Edmund Villagomez, Representative, is this you? Did you, for the record, dine with the governor on March 7, 2019?
No.
Oh, okay, so this is another Ed Moon. Again, Chairman, colleagues, we don't know who Ed Moon is, but certainly he must be an important person because this was at Kevin's Prime Rib and Seafood, and the total amount that was paid for was $442. That included some really good food. It's so good that it wasn't even listed. It just says chef's table, so it must be pretty extraordinary. But again, $442 that taxpayers paid. No indication who Edmund is, what was discussed, or anything. So once again, it fails to meet requirement Title 70. And then that's for 6 people for $442. So it was a pretty good meal. Some Corona beers too. Somebody ate great food and had the Diet Coke. That usually doesn't work. But anyway, and then on the very same page, what was concerning was a lunch at Kimpachi Restaurant. The governor said he had lunch at Kimpachi Restaurant, a meeting with Jack Manglonia, Senate President, and Aaron Camacho, and John Camacho, and it seemed very strange that, well, such a meeting would take place, because we were curious to know what meeting would need to take place with these individuals involved. So we reached out to Miss Erin Camacho. I actually emailed her, and she sent a letter of testimony, a statement for A00041. If you pull out her response to me, it says, "Hello, Representative Probst. Yes, I would like to explain what happened. On March 7, 2019, I took my father, Juan A. Camacho, to lunch at Kimpachi Restaurant in Deerpan for his birthday. Upon entering the restaurant, we saw the governor and his table, so we said hello. We then proceeded to have lunch at a separate table. When it came time to pay, I found out that the governor paid for our bill. Their table left before we were done, so I assumed he paid for it with personal funds. I was extremely disappointed that I was named in the newspaper for this memo, as it was untrue." So, according to Miss Erin Camacho and her father, they were there for a birthday, but they were mentioned in this meeting, but they were not even part of the meeting, yet their meal was reimbursed, and it was actually his birthday. So again, that's concerning, because how does this even meet official representation expense? It certainly doesn't. Most importantly, they weren't even at the table. They were at a completely separate table. We do have her statement submitted into record. So that is obviously, somebody's not telling the truth here. And
Is it the governor?
Ms. Erin Camacho has, for the record, submitted that.
It rhymes with Ralph
I do not
Torres.
understand why she would say something that would not be true. So anyway, that's something that, again, is a discrepancy. And then, if we turn to page 36, just more receipts that no indication as to what's going on, who exactly is in attendance. And then if you move to 00037, Hard Rock Cafe, meeting with the Shell representative. It's a small amount, only $28.76. But again, no indication as to what this meeting is for. Then on the same page, Costa Restaurant, it has a lunch that is $264 plus a $30 tip for a total of $294. Meeting with Taiwan Adventist Hospital rep. You don't know anything about this because, again, nothing is included. Again, violation of Title 70. Now, you flip the page. We're almost done. Don't worry. Sorry to bore you. On the next page, A00038, this is really interesting, that on March 11, 2019, at 11:59 a.m., the governor had a meeting. At the bottom it says meeting with OMB regarding budget issues. We went to Namde Moon Restaurant, and the total was $196. As far as I know, the OMB is in the same building. We taxpayers spent $196 so that he could meet with OMB regarding budget issues when his office is upstairs. Hers, I believe, is downstairs. And had she just traveled up the elevator or walked up the stairs, that would have saved $196 of taxpayer dollars. I've had lunch with several people to discuss issues. I don't know if I've ever had a $196 lunch at Namde Moon. This is just, once again, not just excess spending, but a violation of Title 70. Nothing whatsoever is explained as to what was accomplished, what was discussed, how this benefits the taxpayers. On the very same page, you have a Costa Restaurant meeting. All it says here is meeting with senators. $211.20 total. Total with tip, $240. Meeting with senators at Costa Restaurant, paid for, again, by taxpayers. These are the types of receipts that we have been looking at and getting, and we're already going over time. But I wanted to submit it for the record, mostly to show that some are saying, what's the big deal? He's a governor, he can spend whatever he wants. But colleagues, I want to remind you that even you, if you have expenses that you would like to submit, you have to justify it and follow specifically Title 70, but you also have to file through the official representation and justification documentation form for you to get reimbursed. Again, these are just some of the many documents that we have reviewed, and we have a lot more to be submitted. And of course, we did submit these for the record, including Ms. Erin Camacho's statement that said that she was not at the meeting with her father. She was not part of that meeting. It was still paid for and reimbursed, and the governor was reimbursed for basically wishing them a happy birthday. I don't think any of us have that type of power. Thank you, Chairman and colleagues.
Thank you, Representative Probst. Any questions, concerns, comments with regards to Representative Probst's submittal of documents? Moving along, any further under new business? Representative Salam.
Thank you. On the Casino Commission's request for an extension, I noted that they asked for an extension to August 18th to submit the records that we requested with respect to the Community Benefit Fund. And I did reach out to both the interim director at the time as well as the CCC legal counsel to ask if they could at least submit the records that they have collected so far at the halfway point. They seem very amenable to that. We don't have to wait until the 18th to get everything. We could at least begin to get some records, and I would suggest, Mr. Chairman, that you work it out with them so that they can give us what they have by Wednesday, August 12th, and we can get the remainder of the records by the 18th. Just so that we can move things along a little more quickly in our review and begin to look at what they have by Wednesday. And on the Northern Islands Mayor's Office request for an extension, he asked for until today. Have we received anything?
Not that I know of since this morning when I got it. It was none.
Okay. Well, he still has a couple of hours, I guess, before the end of the day. So perhaps we'll get those tomorrow, hopefully. Okay. Thank you.
Noted. We'll have my office follow up with regards to CCC and what current documents they have so far. Any further under new business? Under miscellaneous? Representative Mongolia.
Thank you, Mr. just on the proposed rule change or amendment to the rule. Can we act on that today?
Can you state, well, I know what you're proposing. I just wanna state it for the record, the council is still working on it.
I have something that council had me review. Should I just take that on? Sure. The proposed rule for special committee on fiscal review of executive expenditure, section 101. Notwithstanding any rule of the House of Representatives, a member of the special committee may appear, participate, vote, and be considered present for all purposes, including but not limited to establishing quorum in a hearing or committee meeting electronically via telephone, video, or electronic means, provided that the member is physically present in the Commonwealth. This provision shall be effective until such time that the flight schedule between the member's location and the respective committee venue resumes to daily operation, and the declaration of a significant emergency or a state of public health emergency has been lifted by the governor.
Thank you, Representative Malonia. Is there any objection to his request? No objection. Can we get a second on that before we vote on it?
Second.
Okay, there is a second. All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All those not in favor, say nay. The motion carries. So the rules is adopted. Any further on the miscellaneous? Representative Gomez.
Mr. Chairman, regarding the Northern Ireland mayor, so he has until the end of today.
Yes.
So we vote on whether to do a subpoena on our next meeting, or does that kick in automatically?
We would prepare and vote on it on the next meeting.
Point of order. We actually already approved the issuance of a subpoena immediately upon, like, the failure of the department or office to comply with the letter.
Okay. Okay, since it's here in the current agenda, let me ask the members if there's any objection to issuing the subpoena today if the mayor of the Northern Islands fails to submit. Is there any objection?
No objection. We could give him some close of business today.
Yes.
And then,
How come it's quiet?
Sorry, everyone. I was snoring a little bit earlier. You may have heard it on the microphones.
There's 6 new COVID cases on Guam.
Oh,
Not like you care,
no,
but.
I don't. Actually. Is the Guam legislature in session yet?
According to Pam's.
Do you think they're actually doing their jobs, or are they just stuck on the Guam legislature? I mean, do you think they're stuck on stupid stuff right now?
Maybe not everyone showed up.
That can be like a consolidated re-election commercial for the Guam legislature. We're like, stuck on stupid, worked for me. You know, like hooked on phonics.
Mm-hmm. Anything work for you?
Mark Torrey was released from house arrest and placed under strict curfew.
Their microphones are off, Challenge? Is that what's happening?
Can you tell me you're coming back to the camera so I can
Oh.
put my feet down for him?
And of course, you got other taxes. Which
Let's switch real
represent
quick over to the Guam
1%.
legislature.
So the bulk of
They're live right now. I think the Office of Finance and Budget is...
So this is dynamic keyframing. It's going to move.
Bamboozling them?
The Office of Finance and Budget is explaining how they arrived at revenues.
It's so cold, Troy.
areas.
Oh, do you want to use this?
Taking the bulk of the general fund appropriation is public education, which represents about 38%, or $238.1 million. Second is protection of life and property at 97.8%. 97.8 million at 16%. This particular category includes all law enforcement, so that's why that amount seems to be really big. Third comes in general government operation at about 90.1 or 14%. Fourth, you got the debt service. That right now is hovering about 91 million or 13%, which represents the payment of 8 bonds. Fifth is the reserve amount of 62.5. That reserve amount includes agencies as the judiciary, public defender, the mayor's council, OPA, the Attorney General's office, the legislature, and the smallest one of all of them, the Guam Board of Accountancy. It all comes out of that reserve amount. Then you have other areas such as community services, and then individual collective rights, which represents 0 and 1% of the total budget respectively. Recreation is not even a percentage, but they do get an allocation of about 2 million. And of course, economic development, again, because the amount is minimal at 4.1, they don't even come in as a percent, but they do get portion of the allocation. Okay, next slide. The next slide now represents basically an overview of special fund revenues anticipated for FY 2021. It's just a comparison between FY 20 and 21. These are, I basically pulled out the bigger of all the special funds that make up the bulk of the special funds, because I think the tracking of these are very, very much concerning and alarming. The Healthy Future Fund basically is the only fund that's really doing its tracking. I won't say well, but at least it's tracking above what we anticipated.
More people are smoking cigarettes.
And you have the others, which is territorial education. If you look at the current budget amount, it's 34.4. What we're budgeting is about a $38 million for different, a minor deduction for 374,000. You got Guam Highway. Current budget is about 25.1. What we're estimating is about 22.8. It shows about a 2.2 decrease in expected revenues. Solid waste, we're almost kind of like the same. So this 49,000 variance can go either way. It can either grow or it could be covered just by how trends go within the next couple of months. One thing about the solid waste, people are saying, how come solid waste is going down? Well, you got to remember solid waste is paid on a couple of factors. One is residential solid waste is paid on a fixed cost, whereas commercial solid waste is paid by tonnage. So if there's no businesses out there opening, there's no tourism out there opening, there's no waste being generated, so therefore what's ending up in the landfill is less than normal. And that's why this reduction in the solid waste fund. Pharmaceutical fund, this is a fix. This basically, you just take off the top of the business privilege tax of a rate of 16.19%. So this represents the 18.8 represents 6.19% of the total expected BBT for FY21, but it represents also a decrease of about 646 million over current appropriation levels. Tourist attraction fund, now this one I think everybody was expecting. I think we all expected a decrease in tourist attraction, but myself included, I did not expect this much of a decrease. But these are coming from the people out there in the industries. This was solidified and verified by GVB. So from a 44.9 million appropriation in FY 2021, we expect to generate at least 18.3. And mind you, the 18.3 is on the high side of the projection. Okay? One thing I want to point out about the Tourist Attraction Fund, for the first 4 months of fiscal year 2020, not only the Tourist Attraction Fund, but most all general fund was doing and tracking very well. There was one time, I think, I believe in January of this year, we were tracking 30 million above appropriation levels, what we estimate to get it at the end of the fiscal year. But all of a sudden, this pandemic comes in, and that $30 million was just liquidated overnight. So happened with the TAF. The TAF was tracking above 44 million, and all of a sudden, in one fell swoop, within the last 2 months, or after February, March, everything just plummeted down. And according to GVB right now, there is zero tourism on Guam. I emphasize zero. So this is, like I said, a reduction was expected, but never in my wildest dreams it would go down this much.
Are we live? I think we are live. I just have to do that delay because just some internet issues. 11:15 p.m., way past my bedtime, your bedtime, and why am I even attempting to go live
Guys, I don't know what's
on
playing. Let me
Facebook this late? Because as we're talking, sorry, I'm just gonna put that message. The best time to talk to you is earlier, obviously, but a lot of things going on. So I'm going to talk to you before I go to bed.
School lunch reimbursement, this again is just a fixed number that we come up every year.
Gather some of my messages, because there's
Here, this is the amount that's allocated for the cost for reimbursement by the feds. So there's no change in that. Custom and quarantine, that again is another fund that is really taking a beating as we maneuver through this emergency. Custom and quarantine, they were tracking about 14 million, a little bit below when we were tracking, but we were hoping that somewhere down the line, pre-COVID, things would have changed, but obviously it didn't. So we're expecting a 9.1 million decrease come FY 2021. And all others, that's just all the other smaller revenues, special revenue categories that we have. They play a big role in the operation of the government because they fund certain operations and programs, but there are some of those programs also that are not, they're not meeting the part, they're not tracking well, but we hope and we anticipate that at least they can maintain. All we're hoping right now that they maintain whatever we project for them. Anything less, would be very difficult. Anything more would be always welcome. But anything less than what we anticipate right now will just aggravate our situation even worse. So total, if you look at 2021 budget, the total estimated revenues expected for 2020 was 247.9. What we're anticipating in the budget for 2021 is 210.8, which is a 37 million drop in special funds. Okay. The next slide, please. This slide just basically gives you, it's just a chart. You can just see how it plays into the whole scheme of how special funds support the government of Guam operations. Next chart, please. Again, this chart actually is just the overview of how special funds are allocated by programs. Of course, general operation takes the bulk of it, 62.4%, a million, or 30%. They come in first. Public health will come in second at 60.2 or 29% of total special funds generated. Public education will come in third, taking about 36.9%, million, or 18% of the pie. For protection of life and property at 17.3 million or 8%. And we have all the other categories that represent, debt service, reserves, miscellaneous, economic development, individual rights, recreation, and community service. So this chart kind of just represents how special funds are allocated and what the percentage and dollar amounts are to each program. And next slide. This is probably my best slide of my presentation. Joe Masi, thank you. And I am available to answer any of the questions you may have regarding our revenue projections. And feel free to ask. Mr. Chairman, thank you.
Thank you, Steve. We'll begin question. We'll start from the back. I will have my Vice Chair, Senator Clinton. Sir, do you have any questions?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. To the OFB Director. So again, just to reiterate and be clear, your office is projecting revenues at what amount for general fund and special funds total combined?
The total amount combined for general fund and special fund revenue collection for FY 2021 is about $985 million for both of those areas. Specifically, $774 million for general fund and $210 million for special fund.
Okay. So the difference in the general fund from the executive budget request is how much?
Are you talking about the variance?
Yes, the variance.
Senator, before I even answer that, in all fairness to the administration, when they submitted their executive budget, they submitted it before the pre-COVID happened. At that time, everything was up and up. We were tracking above. Government of Guam wasn't in any financial crisis at the moment, so things seemed to be pretty much rolling in the right direction. But since then, of course, with the COVID and stuff, it has changed basically everything that we're doing today. They have not submitted an official change in the executive budget, but I have worked with them on a couple occasions using various numbers they presented. Nothing official, just working with them. And those numbers, changed. They were fluid. We just kept changing as more information came. The more we knew about stuff, the more we were a little bit more, I would say, educated in kind of like going forward. But if you're asking me What's the total difference in that? Yeah, the total difference between, I believe, the 1,005,8 submission and our 775 number is about 109 million, I believe. Decrease. But this is total now.
Okay, but you're talking about the $1 billion figure you said, that's total for general fund and special, right? From
No,
the executive budget request, is that what you're talking?
it also includes the federal match.
And federal, okay? So what is your total number, federal, general fund, special revenue? And what's the variance between your total and the executive budget request total?
Apologize, my colleagues. Allow everybody, all my colleagues, 3 questions, 1 round, 1 time around, okay? Just continue, Mr. Steve, you can answer the question.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, for addressing me as senator. That was one of my aspirations. I'll take that up later with you. Anyway, yes, to answer your question, Senator, the total amount compared to the executive budget as to our number is but the variance right now is about $125 million.
So your budget is 125 million less, that's the variance, correct?
Yes, it is.
So I get 3 questions, right? So this is my third? Is that correct? I have one more question, Mr. Chair.
Please continue. I yield my questions to you. I won't be asking any questions. You're my vice. Go ahead, continue.
So So the variance is 100, I'm sorry, how much? 120?
125.
125, okay. But that's their executive budget versus your proposed budget, correct?
Yes, but again, Senator, keep in
That's
mind.
pre-COVID, their executive budget request is pre-COVID.
Yes.
Yes, okay, so just to be clear, that's their numbers pre-COVID.
Yes.
Have they indicated to you what their numbers are post-COVID?
We have worked on several different figures to try to compromise on what we felt was the most realistic and achievable ones, and they've brought their amount down. As far as the general fund is concerned, to date, as we speak, I think we're only off by about $7 million.
But they haven't submitted anything officially, correct?
No.
That's just in discussions with your office.
It's numbers that we were working with. We were trying to come up with some sort of agreement to these numbers, and those were the last numbers that were on the table for discussion.
Okay. With the variance from the executive budget request and this substituted budget, what were the major areas that showed a decline in revenues that led you to produce that lower amount?
They have adjusted basically their areas within income tax, withholding, and corporate.
And what was the last one, I'm sorry?
Huh? Yeah, the GRT.
GRT, okay. So income tax, withholding, and GRT, do you have the amounts for what was the variance between those from the executive budget request and the substitute budget?
Senator Clint, Steve, on the drive, there is a comparison between OIB and BBMR's projection. You can see that on your drive, right, Steve? If you can present that, and we do have Mr. Carlson on the line, so that certain questions can be answered off the bat, and maybe Senator Clint, Steve, maybe you can present that, if you can present that in reference to what's on the drive. Can you see that on the drive?
No, but we need to give it to them.
You have it, right? You have it on the drive? let's take a quick recess real quick so we can get everybody online with that comparison so we can all see this. Thank you. Short recess, because I want to make sure Mr. Carlson's also involved in the discussion. So if any of my colleagues want to ask him questions, they'll be available too. Thank you. Short recess.
So we're at a part of the Guam legislature's discussion of the budget where they're pulling whatever out of their asses. I don't hear anyone. Well, maybe we missed it. Maybe it was during the time that we were casting the Saipan stuff that maybe someone asked how did we arrive at the revenue projections, but I don't think so. I think we're still at the beginning part of the presentation by the Office of Finance and Budget on, well, they're just regurgitating onto charts what is on a piece of paper, and it really doesn't seem like they're going to get anywhere anytime soon. And because I'm very bored and tired, if you heard me earlier, I was the one snoring. We're just going to cut this stream for now. And I'd like to tell you that we're going to pay attention to whatever it is that the legislature is talking about, but probably not. I'll probably just ask our sources inside the legislature to tell us what happened. For Candid News, we are calling this a day because we started very early and we are tired and we have no interviews tonight. So, and this is the private sector and we can make our own hours, okay? All right? We will see you guys tomorrow.
Tomorrow evening is Dave Duenas.
Yes, we love Dave.
Yeah,
Dave is awesome. I can't wait for that interview. We will likely be back in the morning, though, to cast the Guam legislature. The legislature will probably continue in the morning, and they will probably, over the next hour and a half, recess for the day. Maybe they'll have like 5 more recesses before they get to the main recess for the day.
So don't get too drunk, guys, but we are out.
We're out. For Candid News, I'm Troy Torres.
And I'm Johnny Rosario.